If you think salt is just something you dip your food in or toss into a pot of soup, you're seriously underestimating one of the most powerful forces that shaped human history. That tiny, glistening white grain, seemingly so ordinary, was once the driving force behind wars, uprisings, and revolutions that literally changed the world. Whole empires grew rich on salt, and entire dynasties crumbled because of it. Back in our hunter-gatherer days, salt wasn't really a big issue. Animal meat and blood gave our bodies all the sodium we needed. But then came the day humans turned to farming, eating mostly vegetables and grains, and suddenly our bodies began to crave salt. That's when it became an absolute necessity. Without salt, your body can't hold on to water, your nerves can't transmit signals, and your muscles can't contract. Strip away salt, and a human becomes exhausted, dizzy, and can even die. It sounds a bit scientific, but just picture it like this. Water is life, but salt is the engine that keeps that life running. Without it, your blood simply can't circulate normally. An adult needs about 5 to 7 grams of salt every single day. Just a few grams too much or too little, and the body reacts violently, completely thrown out of whack. But the value of salt goes way beyond health. It was the ultimate secret weapon that allowed humans to preserve food. Tens of thousands of years before refrigerators existed, salt was the only thing keeping meat, fish, and vegetables from rotting away. Thanks to salt, people could carry meat over long distances, surviving harsh winters or long droughts. Because of that, wherever there was salt, people settled. Humanity's very first trade routes weren't built to carry gold, silver, or precious gems. They were built to carry salt. In ancient Europe, they established an entire salt road, stretching all the way from the Adriatic Sea right into Rome. In China, camel caravans hauled salt across the Gobi Desert. In Africa, endless lines of people marched across the Sahara to trade salt for gold. If oil is considered black gold today, back then, salt was truly white gold. And whenever something becomes that precious, governments will inevitably try to grab a piece of it. The earliest rulers understood that whoever controlled the salt controlled the very survival of the people. So, salt taxes began popping up everywhere. In China during the Tang and Song dynasties, the imperial court held a total monopoly on salt. They banned the public from making sea salt and forced them to buy only government-produced salt. Every year, salt revenues made up a massive percentage of the national treasury. Over in France, it was the exact same story. They slapped on a notorious salt tax so hated that just hearing its name made people want to riot. Common French folks were forced to buy salt at exorbitant prices, while the nobility got it completely free. Maddening, right? And that deep resentment simmered for hundreds of years until the revolution finally erupted. In India, it was even more bitter under British rule, where the tax on salt was so heavy that even the poorest people had to pay just to have flavor in their food. Then, one day in 1930, Mahatma Gandhi led thousands of people on a 390-kilometer march to the sea to make their own salt. The sight of thousands of Indians gathering salt by the ocean became an unforgettable, iconic symbol. Just a tiny grain of salt, yet it sparked an entire independence movement. Many call these the Salt Wars. It didn't just happen in India or France. Even Russia saw a massive salt riot back in the mid-17th century. The reason was simple. The king raised the salt tax, the people starved, suffered, and got furious. So, they rebelled, and all of Moscow was swallowed in a sea of fire. In 17th century Spain, the people of the Biscay region rose up against the salt tax too. In Venice, the salt city of Italy, salt was the very foundation that made them rich, turning them into one of the most powerful maritime empires in the Mediterranean. Down in Africa, regions with salt mines became epicenters of power. The ancient kingdom of Mali, for instance, grew fabulously wealthy from trading salt, not gold. In fact, the richest man on the planet made his fortune from the salt trade. Salt didn't just feed people, it forced them to bow down. Can you believe that the English word salary actually comes from the Latin salarium, which literally means salt money? Ancient Roman soldiers were paid their wages in salt. No salt, no fighting. That's why so many empires were built entirely on salt. In Austria, the city of Salzburg, home to the famous Salzburg Football Club we all know, literally means salt castle. In Germany, there's a place called Halle, which translates to the place of salt. In China, regions like Sichuan and Jiangsu grew incredibly wealthy from mining salt, while others, along the coast, harvested sea salt. Yet, the more precious it became, the more it seemed to be exploited. Once rulers began viewing salt as a white gold mine, the people suffered even more. From something that saved human lives, salt slowly turned into shackles of oppression. People were forbidden from making their own, forced to buy from monopolies, and hit with absurd taxes. And when you tax a basic survival necessity, you push people past their breaking point. The uprisings weren't just about a physical hunger for salt. They were a cry for justice. Salt transformed from a simple seasoning on the dinner table into the flavor of raw power. Whoever had the salt had the power. Whoever banned the salt lost their freedom. And so, those salt roads wound across the entire globe, connecting the world. Salt from the Adriatic reached Rome, as I mentioned. Salt from Lake Chad traveled all the way to Europe. Salt from the Sahara was traded for gold, ivory, and slaves. It drove massive commercial voyages and birthed prosperous, bustling cities. They say if you want to understand why humans settled where they did, just follow the trail of salt, because wherever there was salt, humanity followed. What's even more fascinating is that salt didn't just dominate economics and politics. It quietly wove itself into our spiritual lives too. From east to west, salt has long been seen as a tool to ward off evil, cleanse impurities, and bring good luck. In Japan, people sprinkle salt at their doorsteps after a funeral to drive away negative energy. In Europe, spilling salt is considered bad luck, so you have to toss a pinch over your left shoulder to break the curse. During Tet, Vietnamese people often say, buy salt at the start of the year, buy lime at the end, because salt symbolizes warmth, luck, and lasting bonds. Salt also features heavily in religious rituals, from baptisms with holy salt water to offerings made to the gods. The ancient Egyptians used salt for mummification, drawing out moisture to prevent decay. Thanks to salt, mummies have survived for thousands of years, a single grain preserving the physical history of a human being. On the flip side, some used salt as a weapon of destruction. During the Middle Ages, when an army wanted to utterly punish an enemy, they would sow salt across their opponent's farmland so nothing could ever grow there again. Of course, you had to be incredibly rich in salt to pull that off. They called it salting the earth, which literally meant total obliteration. So, salt could save life, but it could also destroy it, a perfect paradox. We usually just think of salt as something we toss into a soup, but it's actually the foundational raw material for the entire modern chemical industry. Remarkably, nearly 70% of the world's salt today isn't used for cooking at all. So, what is it used for? Industrial manufacturing. For example, to make glass, factories use soda ash sodium carbonate derived from salt to lower the melting point of silica sand, making it melt faster and save energy. Without salt, there would be no car windshields, no smartphone screens, and no glass windows in your home. In the plastics industry, salt is the primary ingredient used to create caustic soda and chlorine, the two core elements needed to manufacture PVC, the most common plastic on Earth, found in water pipes, electrical cables, doors, and flooring. Millions of tons of salt are electrolyzed every year to separate sodium and chlorine, which are then used to create countless different materials. You could say that without salt, the plastics industry would be completely paralyzed. In metallurgy, salt is used to clean metal surfaces, eliminate impurities, and prevent oxidation during heating. In textiles and dyeing, salt helps color bind tightly to fabric so it doesn't fade. In agriculture, it's used to produce potassium chloride fertilizer, one of the three basic fertilizers feeding the world's crops. Salt has even made its way into the energy sector. Sodium-ion batteries, which are expected to replace lithium batteries in the future, rely on salt as their primary sodium source. Even Tesla's famous electric car batteries and wind turbines need compounds derived from salt for cooling fluids or insulation layers. Then look at medicine and cosmetics. Salt is the backbone of antiseptics, saline solutions, IV fluids, exfoliating scrubs, mouthwash, and even shampoo. The everyday items you use, from a bottle of eye drops to a tube of toothpaste, all leave a trail pointing back to salt, whether a little or a lot. Even in high-tech industries, salt is used in chip manufacturing. When cleaning silicon wafers, engineers use special salt solutions to wash away impurities and neutralize surface electrical charges. In other words, semiconductor technology simply cannot exist without salt. When you tally it all up, scientists estimate that salt has over 14,000 different uses, a massive list of applications. It is present in every single corner of modern life, from the glasses on your face to the phone in your hand and the car you drive. And the incredible thing is, all of these uses stem from one basic reaction. When you dissolve salt in water, it splits into sodium and chloride ions. Those are the two tiny building blocks that helped construct almost the entire modern world. Meanwhile, inside your own body, salt plays a critical life or death role. Too little salt and you faint. Too much salt and you slowly die from high blood pressure and heart disease. Today's world is still heavily ruled by salt, only now it's no longer a weapon of taxation, but a major public health issue. The WHO estimates that nearly 2 million people die every year from eating too much salt. Humanity once went crazy over a lack of salt, and now we are suffering from having too much of it. Talk about a twist of irony. Looking back, salt has walked alongside human history like a silent witness. From the ancient salt mines of Egypt, through the trading routes of Africa, to the revolutions in India, it has been deeply tied to war, faith, power, and the very survival of mankind. Without salt, humans couldn't preserve food or sustain life. Yet with salt, humans turned it into a tool to oppress one another. A tiny grain of salt, but it carries a massive story of power, survival, and even human greed. It's no wonder the world went mad over it. Not just because it was valuable, but because we desperately needed it. And even now, when it's no longer scarce, we still need it just as much. When something is both valuable and vital, and then someone tries to control it, you get the perfect recipe for historical chaos, which is exactly the story of salt. Centuries ago, people stole salt, smuggled salt, and even killed each other over it. Today, we have it in absolute abundance to use as we please. Salt is what keeps us alive, makes our food taste great, cures illnesses, preserves bodies, fuels heavy industry, sparks wars, and ignites the hunger for freedom. A single grain of salt, yet the entire world once shook because of it. Thanks so much for tuning in to this story. Salt really is incredibly important, isn't it? If you found this fascinating, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share it around. But for now, it's time to say goodbye.